بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. Inshallah tabarak wa ta'ala, we're going to continue in our reading in this abridgment of the Ihya Ulumuddin of Imam Ghazali radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, Hujjatul Islam. And we are in the section of Qawa'idul I'tiqad, which are the foundations of the belief. In today's reading, and we will briefly go through this, not with much detail, on the case which talks about al-Iman and al-Islam. In one way you can say faith and submission. And is there a difference between the two? So inshallah tabarak wa ta'ala, Imam Ghazali will discuss it, and we'll do some brief comments on some aspects of it. We know that this discussion comes up in our practical experience when we read the hadith of Jibril alayhi salam, in which the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam asked Sayyidina Jibril to explain to him, tell him about, Jibril asked the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam to tell him about al-Islam. And the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam answered it by talking about the outward practices of the religion, like the uttering of the testification of faith, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah, the establishment of the prayer, the paying of zakat, the fasting in Ramadan or al-Hajj. And then when he asked him about al-Iman, which is dealing with the faith, he said that Iman is to believe in Allah, His angels, His books, His messenger, to the end of what the Prophet ﷺ mentioned. And that talked about the beliefs in the heart. So in generally, when we talk about al-Islam, we're talking about the outward rules of the religion, al-fiqh. And then when we talk about al-Iman, we're talking about the inward belief, which is an indication to ilm al-aqidah. So there is the faith, and then there is the outward practice, in some sense. Then in another sense, it is, when is one a true believer, or is one just outwardly submitting? And this gets into the subject of the mu'min or the munafiq, right? And then in another way, they have the same meaning. One cannot be mentioned without the other. So Imam al-Ghazali is going to kind of give us an insight into the scholarly talk of how terms are understood. The point that we want to get out of this is that sometimes terms are used differently in a context. So not every time you use a term, it means the same thing. Depending on the context terms are used, they take on different meanings and they have different indications. Essentially, that's what we want to understand. And then in each context, use the terms properly. Bismillah, let us begin.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. As-salatu wa-salamu ala Rasulullah. The author, may Allah have mercy on him, said, 2.3, Faith and Submission. There are three questions that relate to this topic.
So faith is al-Iman. When we say what is the and translated here, al-Iman, that's faith. And al-Islam, he's translating as submission. So these are the terms we're talking about. Al-Iman and al-Islam. Here, al-Islam doesn't mean the religion. When he's saying al-Islam in this context, he's not talking about the entire deen. He's talking about an aspect of the deen. So, because giving you right off, so you see a difference. When we say, like Allah said, verily the religion that is accepted by Allah is al-Islam, or whoever chooses other than al-Islam, as it is not talking about the same meaning here. There's a difference.
2.3.1, the first question. There's disagreement among the men of knowledge on whether submission is identical to faith. Some scholars maintain
the difference is al-Islam, is it al-Iman or other than al-Iman? So is submission actually the faith or other than that, conviction?
Some scholars maintain that they are identical. Others maintain
like
that
Abu Hanifa, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, Imam Abu Hanifa, he said they are like the front of a thing to its back, inseparable, right? So the front of a thing to its back is inseparable. So al-Islam and Iman are one.
Others maintain that they are two different, unrelated matters, while yet others maintain that they are different but related matters. There are three inquiries relating to this question. The first inquiry is linguistic and deals with the meaning of the two words. The second is exegetical and deals with their conventional meanings in the parlance of the sacred law.
Here is a point that you need to learn when you're studying Islam traditionally. You have words that have a technical meaning, right? And you have words that have a linguistic meaning. So if it's a linguistic meaning, it's called lughawi, right? If it is a technical meaning, it's called shar'i, right? It's very important to understand the difference. We had a long discussion in the masjid about this yesterday. Sometimes a term has a linguistic meaning, lughawi meaning, but when you talk about it in the religion, it has an entirely different meaning. And it applies to something that necessarily is not, it doesn't apply to in the language. It has a deeper meaning sometimes, or it's more, it entails more. For instance, if I said as-salah, the prayer, linguistically, that means a dua, supplicating. But if I say it shar'i, and I use the term as-salah, it entails that those actions and sayings that begin with takbir, Allahu Akbar, and end with taslim, assalamu alaikum, and everything with its rules and conditions in between. So if you say as-salat, you cannot just go like they used to do in the nation, raise their hands and point and face the east. That's not salah. Shar'i, linguistically, religiously, technically. Though making dua, linguistically, it would be it, right? But that's not what is intended by the word when it's used to establish the salah. So there's the linguistic side of it, then the technical side. And when you study classical books, they're going to give you the linguistic meaning of a thing and then the technical religious meaning of that thing. And sometimes, depending what science you're talking about, in that science is going to have a different technical meaning. Everyone follow that? No, go ahead.
The third is juridical and deals with their rulings in this world and in the world to come.
So that's a fiqh meaning. So in terms of fiqh, what does this word mean? What does it entail? So there's a fiqh meaning. So he's giving a lughawi meaning, a shar'i meaning, a fiqh meaning. All of these are different meanings. And amazing, you will never learn these details thinking that I only follow Quran and Sunnah. You won't even find these terms like this in the Quran or in the Sunnah, which would tell you, and all of the scholars, they understand these terms, which would tell you that the Quran and Sunnah are sources from which other rulings, legal rulings, are extracted. But it's from the qualified mujtahid scholars that do that, and those who follow in their methodology.
The first inquiry, linguistically, faith is tantamount to assent. Allah exalted as He says, but thou wouldst never believe us. Submission is tantamount to abidance.
All right, go back again. I'm sorry.
Linguistically, faith is tantamount to assent. Allah exalted as He says, but thou.
Let's say conviction. That's a much clearer word, I think.
Faith is tantamount to conviction.
Yeah. Al-iman ibaratun and it-tasdiq. So it is an expression, tantamount, is an expression about a tasdeeq, about conviction. So faith is an expression about conviction, right? So when you say I have iman, that means a tasdeeq al-jazm, a firm conviction.
Linguistically, faith is an expression about conviction. Allah exalted as He says, but thou wouldst never believe us. Submission is tantamount to abidance, surrender, compliance, and yielding.
So here, al-Islam ibaratun an al-taslim wal-istislam bi-id'an wal-inqiyad. So when you have Islam, submission, that means you surrender, you absolutely give yourself over to a thing. That's submission.
An abstention from insubordination, aversion, or stubbornness.
Right. So you don't become obstinate to whatever you're commanded to do. You just surrender. That's Islam. Linguistically.
Assent has a specific locus, which is
so tasdeeq. So assent here, whenever you hear it, I'm assuming that's what he's going to do. Assent means conviction. So what's the location of real conviction? It is al-qalb, it's the heart. Right? Go ahead.
Conviction has a specific locus, which is the heart, while the tongue is only its exponent.
In other words, the tongue is the interpreter of what is in the heart. Right? So they said, the heart of a man is on his tongue. The tongue is expressing what is in the heart. And, you know, in our... oh, my God. I'm sorry. In our culture, in the hood, they used to say that alcohol is truth syrup, right? He's drinking that truth syrup because when a person becomes intoxicated, all the stuff that was really in his heart start coming out on his tongue. So The truth syrup. Oh my goodness. Don't drink truth syrup. Ah, it's haram. Ah. I'm laughing because we were having a conversation, and somebody just talking in the masjid, and we were talking about how to run your house as a man, right? Who's in charge at the house? So it was so funny. Um, so we were running late to get home, and he says to the brother, "You better get home before you get in trouble." And said, "Did you see Eddie Murphy Raw?" He said, "No." As his father get drunk or something, he said, "Listen, the rules is on the wall." In my house, on the rules. He was drinking, and the truth juice started getting him to say how he really felt. He said, "If the fire come and you outside, I don't care." Oh, y'all crazy. Oh man, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Submission, on the other hand, is more general, for it includes the heart, the tongue, and the limbs.
So, conviction is general, and faith is more specific, because faith is talking about, right, much more, right, or a specific thing, which is the heart. Whereas submission, it's general, the heart, the tongue, the limbs, right? Mm, go ahead.
Any assent with the heart is a surrender. Would that be any conviction with the heart is a surrender?
Yeah, فإن كل تصديق بالقلب فهو تسليم. So every conviction of the heart is actually surrender. Yes.
Therefore, from a linguistic point of view, submission is more general while faith is more specific.
Mm.
Faith is thus the loftiest part of submission. Hence, every conviction is a surrender, but not every surrender is a conviction.
Wow. Get it? فإذا كل تصديق تسليم وليس كل تسليم تصديق. That's a beautiful expression, right? So you have two aspects of it. So if we divide them linguistically, we see how they have different meanings. So sometimes, if you have all the time, if you have sincere conviction, you're going to surrender. But you can have surrender, but not conviction in the heart. You can surrender to something, but you're really not convinced about it. And from our side, I want to share something. We have to learn the religion to the extent where we have a firm conviction in our heart that Islam is true and everything other than it is false. That's the kind of tasdeeq, conviction, we must have. Islam is the truth, and everything other than it, everything that contradicts it, is false. We're talking about Deen al-Islam. Hence, every single rule in the religion, at the heart level, you must surrender and be absolutely convinced of its truthfulness. That's the E. Even if you don't practice, make sure your conviction is like that. Even if you're not able to fulfill all the rules or some of the rules, regardless of that fact, at the heart level, this is the truth that should be surrendered and submitted to. Not should, must be surrendered and admitted to. At that level, that's real Iman. And then you say to yourself, I am falling short and deficient. Let me pause here. Imam al-Haddad, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, he has a book called Risalatul Mu'awwana, or the Book of Assistance. We've read that book and we'll continue to read it over and over again. In his introduction of this book, he opens it up by saying, the needy slave of Allah who admits of deficiency and falling short. That line right there. The needy servant of Allah who admits of deficiency and falling short. And Imam al-Haddad, you have to put this in context, that statement. It's like amazing. And it relates to a tasdeeq, al-jazm, and certainty in that absolute conviction with certainty. It really, really like pops off the page, you could say. Because it's this person who's making that statement. Imam al-Haddad was a knower of Allah, al-arifu billah. He reached the level of al-qutb, the spiritual pole of his time, right? Meaning the head of the awliya. Imam al-Haddad used to pray every morning when he was a young man, 100 rak'ah a day. Optional, besides the regular prayers, all the sunnah prayers, 100 rak'ah a day. Teaching, memorizing, preserving, right? Despite all of that spiritually guiding, he said, I admit that I am deficient and falling short. Outwardly, if you look at him, you're like, what are you falling short? Doing what? Like, you are the elite of the elite in your practice, right? But for him, he's looking at all of the aspects of al-Islam as a deen, not linguistically, al-Islam as a deen, as a religion, a way of life. Everything it entails, outwardly, inwardly, physically, spiritually, the levels of spiritual elevation. He's looking at all of that. He's looking at not just the body in relation to that, not just the heart in relation to that, not just the nafs in relation to that, not just the ruh in relation to that, even the seer in relation to that. All of it. He's looking at every aspect. And at that, he's convinced that Islam calls for every aspect of us to be in total surrender and submission. And if at any level you're not connected, you're falling short. That's deep. That's vision. Now, for us, we only think about the body. Maybe sometimes we talk about the heart. Maybe we talk about the nafs. But anything above that, we like. And the things, and that's a higher level. The things that we're talking about, the heart and the nafs, we're just talking about them. Really, really tapping into the reality of what is called for from each. Right? When we speak about the nafs, we talk about it at its lowest level. That's deep. You know, that nafs, al-amaratu bisu, that's what we're talking about. That nafs that is inclined to evil. But the different levels of the nafs itself and what the dictates at that level is called upon us to comply with and surrender to. We ain't talking about that at all. Imam al-Haddad is going beyond that to the soul. and beyond that to the innermost secret. And at that point, with all that, he's saying, I'm falling short and I'm deficient. So this is spiritual masters' submission and surrender and conviction to make them realize that even though I'm doing everything that outwardly looks possible, there's more that I can do. And since I am not meeting that rank, I'm falling short. So how should we be? None of us should be arrogant. None of us should in the beginning think we've really arrived anywhere. As one man, they said to Sayyidina al-Junayd al-Baghdadi, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, they said, so-and-so thinks he has arrived. And Sayyidina Junayd responded, yes, he has arrived to the hellfire. Just by his delusions, he's arrived, yes, to the hellfire. If nothing else, by being deluded to the fact that he thinks he has arrived. Right? So for all of us, these are just examples. So, and we know ourselves, right? So we want that conviction that is so real that it in itself is submission, not a submission that has no conviction. Outwardly, we look like we're doing it, but inwardly, we way out there, right? That's a deep, deep thought. So every conviction is true submission, but not every submission is true conviction. That's deep. That's a deep line. You should highlight that. Read that line again. Inshallah, please.
Hence, every conviction is a surrender, but not every surrender is a conviction.
Right. And just to emphasize, so it sticks in our mind, put absolute conviction. Yeah, conviction is, but it needs to be such that there's no possible doubt. Right? As Allah mentioned in the Quran, إنما المؤمنون الذين آمنوا بالله ورسوله ثم لم يرتابوا. The only real believer and mu'min is the one who has iman, at-tasdeeq, al-jazm, that real unshakable conviction are those who believe in Allah and His Messenger and thereafter never doubt. In other words, everything Allah revealed is true, and everything the Prophet ﷺ conveyed is true, no doubt about it. That's what is sought after. May Allah grant us a portion of it.
The second inquiry, this relates to the meanings of faith and submission in the parlance of the sacred law.
Oops, we have to stop. I'm almost at 8 o'clock. Okay.
Okay,
Or should we go longer or we pause?
it's up to you.
Let's pause here and we'll come back tomorrow, inshallah, because we'll try to go from 7:30 to 8, or if we can go a little longer, but I got a late start today, so inshallah, let us pause here. We took the first thing, and that's a lot, inshallah. In a little is a lot. MashaAllah. Let me remind you of our upcoming seminar, in-person seminar series on Aqidah, a comparative approach. Let me put the link for you. It will be coming up in the last Saturday of the month, of this month, the 28th, at Masjid Muhammad in Atlantic City. It requires a registration fee. I would pre-register. It helps us to prepare for the serving people properly, food and everything. So we should get in a habit collectively. We've been around each other enough that we need to learn to cooperate. So register, pre-register at that link. And it's going to be probably bi-monthly, yes, bi-monthly, or every 2 months, depending upon our schedules, for at least 3 sessions. It's going to be a unique way of studying Aqidah in terms of learning the proper Aqidah, learning the different creeds that are spread in the name of Islam in our time that have become forms of distraction from people learning the correct creed. How they developed, who are their proponents, and how to distinguish them from the true creed of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. So it's going to be extremely informative in such a way that not only do we learn the correct creed of Ahl Sunnati al Jama'ah and why and how and its evidences, but also we learn how to clarify errors in creed when they appear. Right? So you're going to learn all of these matters, inshallah tabaraka wa ta'ala. It will start off simple, but it will get a little complicated and academic. It will. So we're going to build it up, because some issues of Aqidah become confusing because of terminology. So Imam Ghazali gave us an indication of linguistic terms, shar'i terms, right? And we have to understand that al-aqidah, ilm al-aqidah, is a science in itself among the sciences of Islam, which means it has its own terminology that's distinct from other sciences. So a lot, what hasn't been done for us is to teach us the vocabulary and the terminology in the fields that we're trying to study, and not mix that vocabulary from another field, which it has a whole entirely different meaning, right? So it's very important to understand that. And as I said, and the scholars mention it, things are made clear by their opposites, right? So I'll give you an example. Last time we had a similar gathering. It was the true Aqidah, the true creed of the Salaf. So we explained in like 3 sessions, I think, 2 or 3 in-person seminars, the true creed of the Salaf. After doing that and listening and explaining, it was astonishing to me to find that some of us were still struggling after that intensive to understand the difference between as-Salaf and the so-called as-Salafiyya. Like these 2 terms. Right? not being able to distinguish between the two, those terms, just the terms, what they imply, and who are those who relate the concepts that come from each group, right? Not being able to distinguish that and mixing them ends up giving one group of people the convictions and beliefs of another group of people that don't apply just because you don't understand the difference between the terms, right? So in other words, as Salaf is one group of people, as Salafiyya is another group of people, and because the names sound the same to one and they don't know the difference, they give the Salaf the beliefs of the Salafiyya, and the Salafiyya claim to carry the beliefs of the Salaf and mix them up and think they are one when they are distinctly different. And we went through like a whole session just on clarifying the difference. In this session, in the comparative Aqidah, we're going to spell it out a little bit more, right? And actually give you the books that relate to that so you can put them side by side and compare. That way it'd be much clearer, right? And to identify all the major teachers or scholars that promote and spread the concepts of each group of people, for instance, as an example, right? So this is important. And now in our time, we've been confronted with variations of the same thing, and names and terminology, if not understood when it's applied or used by certain groups, can lead to more confusion. We're going to clarify, inshallah, all of that with documented text. So that means when you finish, you actually can explain, no times, no dates, no sources, and then can distinguish between them. Very important. Very important. And I think about those things because we didn't receive that when we started. Like, it wasn't explained to us so easily. We had to, like, years and years of discovery. We're going to try to give that to you in a straightforward, direct expression that you would understand it. Because trust me, even in Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah, you have this issue that you need to understand. And I speak for us as a people. It's so important because we have so many ideas being given to us in our time, especially with the internet, so many variations of the same thing. You have to be like precise to understand the difference. I had a discussion that I was supposed to have this week, but I don't know if it's going to happen. I doubt it. I was listening to a person. He's like, I wasn't listening to him, actually. It was sent to me by someone else. But this person has, like, I guess he's a social media influencer. And he's debating, thousands of followers. And when I talked to him, I realized he doesn't understand terminology. He doesn't understand what terms mean in language. That's his problem. His mind cannot conceive concepts that sound similar but are completely different. He doesn't understand that. Part of it is that his knowledge base is too little. So his Google search engine is not supported by real scholarship that he actually sat and learned. So he's using resources without any tech support. So he's coming up with amazing things. But because he doesn't understand concepts, it don't make sense to him. To him, this is obvious. No. In fact, that's insane what you just said. Not obvious. Obviously insane. You're right. But he got thousands of followers. Thousands. Tens of thousands. Videos. And I talked to him. You don't understand. And he got angry with me. This is not a teacher student. You studied Islam for 3 years. You are a student. Like, what are you talking about? This is not a student-teacher relationship. You only studied the things you're talking about for 3 years. And in those 3 years, you really haven't studied. You couldn't study in 3 years. It's impossible. What are you talking about? But he's going at it. I said, I mean, like, 3 years? You ain't even begin. You haven't even read the books to even talk about the stuff. You haven't even been exposed to the material. But the world we live in, and actually people listen, like, challenging. You don't even know what you're talking about. But he called me arrogant and disrespectful. I'm disrespectful? You don't think let's think about it. If you're in any field and you only study real field 3 years, and I'm not talking about real study, I'm talking about you've been reading books for 3 years, are you qualified to do anything? I mean, like, in any field. I don't even know no field, worldly or religiously, that just 3 years of self-reading, being self-taught, even if you had some classes and some lessons. I'm talking about most of your study is self-research. I don't know who's going to qualify you for anything. Would y'all agree with that? I mean, do you know of a science? This 3 years you are expert and you're qualified to explain it and teach it to everyone else. Right? Think about that. But that's what we face. And actually refuting people that say the total opposite of what you're refuting. You're using evidences and scholars as a proof. Those scholars themselves refute you. That doesn't even make sense. Like, have you read? No, I know you haven't. That's the point. You haven't read. So the same refutations you're applying against positions using scholars who held those positions in the same book you're reading. Listen to what I said. You're refuting positions using a scholar and a book that is filled with the very positions that you're refuting. And the book is filled with the contradiction of your refutations. That obviously, but guess what? You probably don't know that because you cutting and pasting. because you Google searching. You don't read. You actually just Google search, find something, cut and paste, put it up as an evidence. You haven't read the book. Obviously, you haven't read the book. That's obvious. Because then your whole argument is refuted by the very books you're using, by the very scholar you're quoting. Your refutations applies to the one you're refuting. The one you're using and what you're trying to refute, he's the biggest proponent of it. What are you talking about? I'm just, my point. And the whole problem is I don't understand terms. I don't understand scholars. I don't understand methodologies. I don't understand the science I'm talking about. That's the problem. That's it. Not that you're a bad person. You don't understand. And you don't want to understand because you don't want anybody to say you're a student. You are a student. You need to learn. That doesn't make no one better than you. We're all students. The delusion is that you actually think you're a teacher of something you know nothing about. And anyone who studied the field knows you don't know what you're talking about. Even a beginner student in the field and knows you don't know what you're talking about. But you get offended and get mad. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Why don't you just say I don't know and help me out? Because you don't know. And it's fine. It's okay. It's not a problem you don't know. We all don't know something. The problem is when you can't admit you don't know. And you don't want to be taught because you don't want to let your likes go down. It's not about your likes. Your likes are not going to protect you in the hereafter. It's about having the correct belief and saving your soul from hellfire. That's what it's about. So since you're following us, you're welcome. We'll still come on and we'll have that discussion. It will be beneficial to you, right? It will be extremely beneficial. You would benefit. You would benefit. It would be great. For all of us, we could benefit. Because Allah is not like his creation. And there's no shared meanings between Allah and his creation. Can y'all put this up just so at least we all know this? And it will, because people watch to get out. Let me put it. There are no shared meanings between the attributes of Allah and the attributes of the creation. Sorry, tell I failed typing in school. Can you all copy this, please? Can you all copy this and put it up? And put it on all of your pages, all of your Facebook, your Twitters, your stuff. Just put that quote. There are no shared meanings between the attributes of Allah and the attributes of the creation. Could you please all do a justice and share that? Put it up. Put it up here so when we leave out, everyone understands that. Put it on your little your Facebook posts, your Twitter, your whatever your stuff, all them things you got. I'm old man, I only know Facebook. Or your Instagram or whatever. Put it on all of them. There's no shared meaning between the attributes of Allah and the attributes of creation. Nobody, I have no idea what you're actually referring to. Your question, did Imam Ahmed have a certain view about this when he was arguing with the Mu'tazili? I don't know the context of your question and what you're exactly talking about. So you have to give me some reference to understand what you're trying to ask. I don't, from your question, I don't know what you're talking about. But this point, if you just understood this, it would be a great help while you unravel the other confusion. But just if you understood this part, that there are no shared meanings between the attributes of Allah and the attributes of the creation. Forget words. There is agreement in wording because of language. So you do have an agreement of meaning because of language. Yes, it's the necessities of language. So you're going to use terms, words, that are the same, but the meanings are completely different, right? So you'll use the same word by the dictates of language, but the meaning that is applied to that word when it relates to the attributes of Allah is distinctly, completely different from the meanings of that word when it's applied to the attributes of creation. Is this clear? The words are the same. You have agreement of wording due to the necessities and dictates of a language, which happens to be Arabic. However, the meanings that are applied to those words when you're talking about the attributes of Allah are distinctly different and in no way resemble or are similar to the meanings of those words when they're applied to the attributes of the creation. That's a foundational rule in Islamic belief. Whoever doesn't understand that actually, in reality, is not a Muslim. Now, I know that, oh, he called us kafir. Whoever thinks that Allah's attributes have the same, similar, shared meaning with the attributes of creation is a disbeliever in reality. Now, unraveling the confusion that led someone to that state of disbelief is another discussion. But we cannot accept that such a thing is Islam. That's not Islam, nor proper Iman. We haven't reached that level of ignorance of our religion that we don't know the difference. You might not can explain it. You might not fully understand why. Because of language and wordings, and that's confusion. These are called doubtful insinuations. They come. We have to unpack that and fix that. But the rule is the rule. The rule is the rule. That's the rule. And it applies. So for us, it is important to understand the rule. And this is what Imam al-Tahawi, who was from the Salaf, intended, which is understood by the scholars who came after him, not because I said it. They understood from his statement, وَمَنْ وَصَفَ اللَّهَ بِمَعْنٍ مِنْ مَعَانِ الْبَشَرِ فَقَدْ كَفَرَ. Whoever describes Allah with a meaning, a characteristic, and it's the word is meaning here, with the meanings that apply to human beings, which are creation, فَقَدْ كَفَرَ. That person disbelieved. He mentioned the same words. It's not just the word. He could have said word. He didn't say word. He meant meanings. Because the wordings are narrated in the text. You can't change the language. Because that's another side of denial. To say Allah said this and change the word to something else. That's denial. The word is the word, but the meaning is not intended as a meaning of creation. This is a very, very fine, important thing to understand. But if you didn't learn, you didn't sit with teachers, you haven't studied long enough in the field, you haven't covered enough books, you wouldn't understand that. And because of words and a lack of understanding, you're applying meanings to those words that don't befit Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's your problem. And it needs to be fixed. That's a problem. That's a serious problem. And that is actually what you're trying to say. You just haven't been taught how to say it. I believe that's what you believe. And if you could drop your pride, I believe you would say, yeah, that's what I mean. I know, but you're saying it wrong. That's what I believe about many of the people who make these mistakes. They haven't been taught how to articulate. They believe the same thing. And when you tell them the outcome of their belief, they're going to deny it. No, I don't mean that. I know you don't. But that's what you just said. Y'all got the point? It's very important. And many people, that's why I say don't rush to call an individual a kafir. Why? Because they have the correct belief. They don't know how to express. So sometimes they express things thinking that that's conveying the correct belief. And then when you have deviant groups saying what sounds similar to what they get confused. That's why we need a comparative approach to Aqidah. The person itself doesn't mean what it sounds like. They don't. They really have the correct belief. They don't know how to express. They've never been taught to express. I'm not going to go into this right now, but this is an example of it, right? And one day I'll do a whole lesson on this just to give you an example, but after, later. For right now, forget that hadith, right? Because if you got this meaning, it's not going to bother you. Just say, I don't know the meaning, but I know the attributes of Allah are not shared attributes of creation. So there is no likeness for Allah. So once you understood that, then there's no comparison between the face of Adam or the children of Adam, right? And a likeness to Allah. That's obvious, not the meaning. That's obvious. When you understood, there is no shared meaning between the attributes of Allah, and you can say the self of Allah in this case, and the selves or attributes of creation. It's all different, distinctly different. Whatever you imagine in your mind, Allah is different from that. If you got that, you'll never be confused by the hadith, even if you don't understand the meaning, and you'll never contradict the wording of the hadith because you don't understand the meaning. Do you got it? It's very important. You'll never contradict the belief in Allah because you don't understand the meaning, because you understand that there is no shared meaning between Allah, His reality, and the creation, and there is no shared between the attributes of Allah and the attributes of the creation. So when I get a narration, the apparent wording of that narration is not going to send me crazy. I would understand that it has a meaning that is correct, even if I don't understand the meaning, and that meaning in no way resembles or likens or makes a similitude between Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His creation. That's it. That was the faith of the basic companion. So you can accept the text when it's authentically confirmed, right? Without likening Allah to His creation. And that point, that brother with all those followers don't understand. He's reading a text and applying meanings that come to his mind to the creator, that are shared between the creator and the creation, and there's no such thing. He don't understand that. Because in his mind, to understand and affirm the text, I have to give the apparent meaning that applies to creation to the creator, and that's a mistake. That's a serious mistake. And its outcome in belief is disastrous and contradictory, big time. May Allah help us. We have to learn. We do. And for me, when we have all these people trying to run away from Aqidah, let's not talk about Aqidah. No Aqidah wars. Yo, bro, some people are falling into blasphemy because you won't address the issue. Seriously, people are becoming kuffar because you won't explain, and you know you've actually learned. And it's not that deep. It can be when people are going above their limits of understanding and not surrendering and submitting, like we talked about, right? And leaving the things that cannot be known to the one who knows them. Like, you can't know the reality of Allah. Only Allah knows his reality, Habibi, not you. You have to submit to that. You have to surrender, and you have to have tasdeeq and taslim. You do. You're not Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You don't know his reality. You can't know his reality. So stop trying. That's a rule. As Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala anhu said, knowing that you cannot know the reality of Allah is knowledge in and of itself. And searching for his reality is disbelief and associating partners with him. You hear that? Knowing that you cannot know the reality of Allah is knowledge in and of itself. And searching for his reality is disbelief and associating partners with him. This is Islam 101. Islam 101. First thing you're supposed to learn about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And guess what? We live in a time where people don't even know that. And arguing against the foundational belief in Islam, calling that Islam. You don't think we need to learn Aqidah? Really? There's no war? That's not an Aqidah war. This is 101 Islam. You don't even know Islam. Now, there's reasons for that, and we got to unravel those reasonings. May Allah help us. At least we can learn enough not to fall into these bad beliefs. At least, like at minimum, we learn enough not to fall in these bad beliefs. And they're spread all over the place in different forms. That's why we need lessons like this to actually explain and show. But this foundational conviction, and I'll close with that, is so important. I don't want to leave without it in our mind. So if we can do it one more time, repost it, because I went over. It's so important. If we can all copy that one more time and put it back, because I would like to go out with that, not other words, because this is a point that we need conviction in. We need a tasdeeq and taslim to this meaning. There is, or there should be, there are no. Let's go this one. not is. There are no shared meanings between the attributes of Allah and the attributes of the creation. Can we all put it up one more time? There are no shared meanings between the attributes of Allah and the attributes. Do a favor, please. Put it on your things, right? And don't make a debate. Just leave it. You know, when some person with anthropomorphic beliefs come on your page, oh, what about this? Just leave it. Don't go back and forth. Just leave it. Just leave the thought there. There are no shared meanings between the attributes of Allah and the attributes of the creation. Don't explain. Don't go all deep. Don't start quoting hadiths and verse. Just leave that meaning there. Sometimes let it sit in the subconscious of somebody. Stop debating all the time. It's not a debate. That's not a debatable item. So you're debating something that's not debatable, which is right. It's not. Would you argue with me on a clear sunny day? The sun at high noon is there, and I say that's the moon. Would you argue with me about that? Would you debate me that it's noontime, 12 on a hot summer day, clear skies, the sun is right above us, beaming, and I say that's the moon? Are you going to debate me in that? Is that a debate? And that's the moon, and that's not the sun. That's the moon, and here's a proof that the sun is not the moon. Come on, man. That's not a debate. And if you think that's a debate, then that's the problem in and of itself. That you're trying to convince me or anyone else that Allah and his attributes share meanings with the creation. I don't know where you learned Islam. I swear I don't. And in that case, I was looking on the thing, this guy from the Nation of Islam said God is a man. To this day, God is a man. And he's reading the Bible and the Quran, and God is a man. And he don't understand that. And you got people who say I'm on the Sunnah and believe that. And that's why when he gave him the position to say God is a man, he listened to you talking about God got hands and a face and feet and moves and sits and rises and comes. That's why he believed that stuff. He listened to you. He go hang out with you and your boys and come up with these crazy concepts. After we work hard to get him away from blasphemy, he listening to you. See, he even asked my brothers on the Sunnah that Allah got hands and feet and moves and sits and rises, comes down, put his feet in the hellfire. And now you wonder why this dude think God's a man. I listen to you. I guess he would come up with that. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. I'll answer this last question, then I have to go. I'm sorry. Can you repeat the last one about it being kufr to try to understand Allah? That was a statement of Abu Bakr, radiallahu ta'ala anhu. He said, knowing the meaning, knowing that you cannot know the reality of Allah is knowledge in and of itself. And searching for his reality is disbelief and associating partners with him. There is another statement of Abu Bakr, which is similar to that. It says, transcended or praise be to Allah, the one who did not make a way for the creation to know his reality except by being unable to know his reality. It has the same meaning, intent. In other words, He's saying glorified is Allah, transcendent is Allah, above non-befitting attributes. He is the one who did not make a way for his creation to know his reality, except by being unable to know his reality. We don't know the reality of Allah. Only Allah knows the reality of Allah. We're obligated to know his existence, to be convinced that he exists. And the reality of his existence is known to him. But we know he exists. We're convinced that he exists. We surrender that he exists with his attributes, with his self, with his actions. However, none of what we imagine is like him, subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when you understand this, all the blasphemous stuff will go right by you. Like, it don't even make sense when you understand this point, right? And this is something unique to Islam only. This belief is unique only to Islam. Alhamdulillah, what the Prophet ﷺ conveyed. All right, may Allah reward you. I repeat to you the event. Please register, inshallah. We're going to go in deep in all these things with evidences. It's something I deem extremely important, right? We need to really, really, really get this down packed. Barakallahu bikum. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.